Enemy aces are a core staple of the Ace Combat series. From a single enemy ace to whole squadrons of them, these pilots serve as the boss fights of each game. Whether it's for a single encounter or multiple of them, these enemy aces need to be memorable, and in a lot of cases for the Ace Combat franchise, they are. Yellow 13 in Ace Combat 4, showing that there can be honor and chivalry even in the midst of war. Pixie in Ace Combat 0 going from a mercenary fighting purely for monetary gain to a pilot who is fighting for what he believes in. Mihai in Ace Combat 7 continuing to fly for the sake of it. He's got no other place to call home, and even though his flying is actively contributing to the possibility of pilots being replaced with AI drones, it's either that or he doesn't get to fly anymore. In his words, he was willing to unleash pure chaos on the world just so that he could keep his wings. Like I said just a minute ago, enemy aces are an integral part to these games. So it should be no surprise that 2020's Project Wingman, a love letter to Ace Combat fans made by just 3 people, includes enemy ace squadrons and individual pilots as part of its campaign. But out of the handful of them that show up, there's one pilot that I want to focus on for this video: Crimson 1. On the surface, Crimson 1 is a bit of a meme enemy ace, and it's not hard to see why. He shows up just to get his ass kicked over and over, he unironically uses gaslighting as a special weapon attack, and he yaps a lot. Numerous people have written off Crimson 1 as just a maniac and nothing more. But I'm here today to say that if you're willing to look a little deeper into Crimson 1, you'll see that there's a story to be told about him too. All of the memes about him aside, Crimson 1's story about his descent into madness due to a mercenary tearing the world as he knows it apart is a sad one. This is the tragedy of Crimson 1. Crimson 1 wasn't just your ordinary Federation airman. For starters, he had elite status within the Federation Air Force, and the military as a whole for that matter, for being a peacekeeper. Peacekeepers consist of ace pilots across all of the countries that fall under the Federation's umbrella. Peacekeepers put the Federation itself above their home countries. If it's in the Federation's best interest to go to war with and obliterate a peacekeeper pilot's home country, that pilot would be more than willing to partake in that conflict if they received orders to do so. Yeah, they may experience mixed personal feelings about such orders, but that pilot would carry them out without any hesitation. That being said, as their name implies, peacekeepers aren't meant to wage war. They're meant to shut conflicts down before they escalate to that point. That's not to say that if peacekeepers were thrust into a full-on war, they wouldn't be able to perform. Far from it. It's just that the intended purpose is for them to put down things like small-scale insurrections or rebellions before they explode into full-on conflicts. There are various peacekeeper squadrons that are part of the Federation Air Force, with Crimson Squadron being considered the best. Crimson 1 was the poster boy of the Federation Air Force, someone that all current and aspiring pilots could look up to. If you were a citizen in a country that was under the Federation's umbrella and you were interested in joining the military as a fighter pilot, there was a high likelihood that you knew about Crimson 1. Crimson 1 was on top of the world. He was well known across the Federation, he had an impressive combat record, he was respected and liked by his squadron, he was feared by his enemies. Like I said, he was on top of the world. He would even be remembered long after he passed. Crimson 1 would be a shining example for future generations of pilots to look to for inspiration and guidance. This guy had it made in the shade. That is, until the Cascadian conflict happened. Cascadia is one of the largest nations in the world, and one of the largest suppliers of geothermal resources to the Federation. Cascadia saw how power-hungry the Federation had become in recent years and didn't want to further fuel such a war machine. The Federation used supplies from Cascadia to expand through military conquests, annexing other countries and forcing them to give up their independence. Cascadia took steps to back out of the Federation in response. However, given that Cascadia was the largest supplier of these geothermal resources, the Federation wasn't about to have any of that. The Federation war machine relied on those resources to keep its military conquests going. So the Federation said, if you won't continue providing us these resources, we'll take them for ourselves. When the Cascadians further resisted, the Federation unleashed its military might. On top of that, Cascadia was struggling internally between people who were still loyal to the Federation and those who weren't, the latter of those two groups being called the Cascadian Independence Force. Crimson Squadron was mobilized to help put an end to this conflict before it got too out of hand, but it seemed like this whole thing would be over before those peacekeepers even showed up. The Cascadian Independence Force was being decimated, and the capital, Presidia, had been captured by the Federation. But then the mercenaries showed up. In particular, Hitman Team, and even more specifically, Hitman 1, Monarch. Crimson One absolutely despises mercenaries. Mercenaries don't have a noble reason to fight. They do what they do for money and nothing else. They don't care about what's right and what's wrong. They don't care if what they're doing is making the world a better or worse place. People like Crimson One, on the other hand, have a true reason to fight, a true source of motivation to get out of bed each morning. Besides, to Crimson One, he, along with the rest of his squadron, are the best of the best. So what if the enemies facing them are mercenaries? It's not like they're gonna last long anyway, right? But during Crimson One's first encounter with Monarch over the Apodoc fracture at Yellowstone, he's shocked at just how bloodthirsty that merc is.
Yeah, nope, I'm a Winchester anyway, let's go.
Although adding a handful more of kills to his combat record probably sounded great to Crimson One, he wasn't about to let one of his pilots die in order to achieve that. He calls for his squadron to retreat, seeing one of his wingmen on the verge of being shot down. As they're retreating, Crimson One remarks that Monarch just got lucky. Crimson Squadron arrived in the AO late because they were coming from a previous battle. With the whole squadron collectively low on fuel and ammo, they weren't performing at their best. Even ace pilots can't keep operating at 100% capacity forever. But regardless of how Crimson One was feeling personally at that moment, that encounter with Monarch spooked him. That mercenary pilot spooked the Federation Air Force's poster boy like no other enemy pilot had before. So much so that Crimson One goes out of his way to warn the entire Federation about Monarch, the pilot with the crown on his vertical stabilizers. Although it would be a little while before Crimson One would fight Monarch again, the Peacekeeper would continue to hear about the mercenaries' accomplishments, how the Cascadian Independence Force is able to keep pushing the Federation back, how because of that merc, Crimson One and the rest of the Federation are losing this war. Crimson One's reputation of being the Federation's poster boy was suddenly in danger. If he couldn't deal with a single enemy ace pilot, then how would the rest of the Federation look at him? And the fact that it wasn't a pilot from another country fighting for a real cause, but a mercenary? Crimson One no doubt felt little jolts of shame when he warned the Federation about Monarch. He's a peacekeeper. No one is supposed to be better than him. If someone was so lethal on the battlefield that they even scared a peacekeeper, the rest of the Federation probably began to sweat a little. Crimson One's next encounter with Monarch would be over the Bering Strait, with the Federation and Cascadian Independence Force throwing their entire air forces at each other. Crimson One and his squadron arrive at the battle late, where they see just how much damage the Cascadian Independence Force, and more directly Monarch, had caused. This was Crimson One's chance to put an end to Monarch. This was the Peacekeeper's chance to prove that he was still worthy of the title that he had earned. That he was still worthy of being the Federation's poster boy. That he was still worthy of being called an ace pilot. When Crystal Kingdom, aka Federation High Command, issues the retreat order after losing one too many pilots, Crimson One initially resists. Whereas he was the one to give the retreat order to his squadron after nearly losing one of them over the Apodoc fracture, here, Crimson 1 has a brief moment where he puts the safety of his remaining wingmen to the side. Crimson 1 was willing to ask that his superior lie to Crystal Kingdom so that more pilots could be sent. But his superior doesn't budge, insisting that the retreat order be followed. Crimson 1, realizing that he'd just be in even more trouble if he disobeyed an order, pulls back with the 2 other Crimson pilots still airborne. To add on to the humiliation, some especially bloodthirsty mercenaries continue pursuing Crimson Squadron and the other surviving Federation pilots. Federation reservist pilots take to the skies to save those survivors. Crimson 1 no doubt felt embarrassed enough not being able to beat Monarch, losing most of his squadron, and needing to retreat, but being saved by reservists on top of that? It was not a good day to be a Federation peacekeeper, that's for sure. Although it was embarrassing, Crimson 1 was ultimately thankful for K9 Squadron to be there, even going as far as to tell other Peacekeeper pilots like those in Steel Squadron to keep an eye on Driver, the leader of that reservist squadron. He could make for a good Peacekeeper pilot one day, but once Crimson 1 landed, I can only imagine how badly he was beginning to crack at that point. The Federation Air Force had just suffered a historic loss of air power. Crimson 1's personal sense of pride has been decimated. He lost wingmen. He lost to Monarch, a mercenary, for the 2nd time in a row. Monarch was getting a lot of praise from his fellow mercs and his Cascadian employers, and even the Federation was giving a plentiful amount of attention to Monarch. The constant, "we need to shoot this guy down" talk was no doubt getting to Crimson 1. Crimson 1 could feel everyone staring at him in person, staring at his name mentioned on a piece of paper, staring at him on whatever poster that was taped to some wall in a city. And you know who everyone was starting to see? They were starting to see a failure. He's not a true ace pilot. If this guy was as good as his combat record claimed, he would have shot down that mercenary by now. We might need someone else to serve as our poster boy for future pilots to look up to. Is it possible that Crimson 1 is a fraud? What kind of ace pilot can't shoot down one merc? We might as well clip this guy's wings if he's gonna be this useless. Crimson 1 is a fraud. So much for being the best of the best, huh? You don't deserve to be called a peacekeeper. You're a disgrace to the Federation. You were meant to put an end to this before it turned into a full-on war. It's because of you and your inability to fly for shit that we're in this mess now. At this rate, the Federation as a whole is going to die, and if it does, it'll be your fault. You should have shot him down over Yellowstone. We wouldn't be here right now if you did. Disgrace! Fraud! Amateur! Yeah, ace pilot my ass. No one will remember you, or if people do, it'll be for the wrong reasons.
We're off center. Close the bulkheads.
When the world was set ablaze with a second calamity following the deployment of cordium-tipped cruise missiles, Crimson 1's mind was shattered. In order to cope with the massive amount of stress compounding his mental breakdown, he started to shift his mindset. No, this is all that mercenary's fault. Hell, this whole war had been Monarch's fault. Ever since he was hired by the Cascadians, all for the sake of money and nothing more, the Federation had been losing. Monarch did this. Monarch caused the Federation to use those cordium-tipped warheads to set the world on fire for a second time. Monarch caused the deaths of countless people, military and civilian. Monarch is a waste of a pilot. Pilots should take to the skies with a real purpose, not just for the sake of money. For Crimson 1, this was personal now. Crimson 1 went from being on top of the world, having it made in the shade, set to go down in history as one of the best fighter pilots in history who would be remembered long after he passed, to being a has-been whose time seemed to be up far earlier than it should. Crimson 1 was in danger of not being remembered for years to come. With how things were going at that moment, he'd be remembered by just a handful of people as a maniac who couldn't even beat a mercenary. But if he could shoot down Monarch, if he could just shoot down that damn mercenary, then he'd still have a chance. He'd still have a chance to be remembered for years to come. He'd still have a chance to play his part in salvaging what was left of the Federation. He'd still have a chance to win this war. He'd still have a chance to avenge Cascadia.
Stacked up. Good time, good time. Crimson Squadron. Engage. Avenge this land. Shut out. Ally sights. Tally
Crimson One manages to survive being shot down. By now, the Peacekeeper had hit his breaking point. The Federation, while not entirely wiped out, had become a shell of its former self. The Federation was going to lose this war, but Crimson One wasn't about to give up just yet. He was still alive and kicking, and he wasn't about to let the mercenary who set the world on fire for a second time go scot-free. The outcome of this war be damned, the only thing that Crimson One cared about at this point was seeing Monarch burn.
Stand by. All units, just hold on. Track your assigned targets. What? My warnings are going off. Who's ever doing this better cease fire. The war's off. I'm not getting anything on my warnings. What's going on? Heads on a swivel. Now. All of us. We've been spiked. From what vector? On bogey dope. Contact. Faded. I see you! Break! Oh God, please, not now! Do not try this, please, God!
Crimson One, armed with cordium-tipped warheads, wipes out everyone in Presidia aside from Monarch. Cascadian Independence Force, Federation, Civilian, it didn't matter who was in the city. All that Crimson One cared about was the possibility of finally shooting down Monarch, the crowned mercenary who ruined his life, the one who tore down the world around him as he knew it. If Crimson One could just shoot down this merc, he'd be remembered as the one who saved the Federation. He'd be remembered as the one who killed the world's most dangerous and disgraceful pilot. He'd re-earn his place as the Federation's best pilot, their poster boy. He'd be able to leave his mark on the world, with tons of future pilots able to hear his story, to know his name, to look to him for inspiration and guidance. But in order to get there, he needed to kill the one pilot who stood between him and the throne that the Peacekeeper desired.
You're a slave to history. Even after calamity, you fight against the only order that can guarantee the safety of your people. You solely are responsible for this. What do you have to show for yourself, Merc? Blood, gold, a broken throne. I will bury you so completely, the earth will turn over 1,000 times before your bodies die. me.
Remember me. Crimson One just wanted to leave his mark on the world. For some of us, myself included, we're not concerned about leaving our mark on the world or anything like that. If we happen to have our names memorized by people for years to come after our deaths, then cool, I guess. But again, for some of us, the thought of someone uttering our names for the last time doesn't make us lose sleep. For Crimson One though, the idea of just being a nobody probably kept him up at night. Yeah, you can definitely make the argument that someone thinking they're so important that they need to have their name spoken by people years after their death comes off as egotistical. Some people are so self-centered that they're an ass about it. But at the same time, I get why some people feel that way. Especially if they had a rough upbringing where parents, teachers, other authority figures, etc. told them that they would grow up to be a nobody. Having someone tell you that you're a nobody, but then you manage to become such a well-known figure that people include your name in things like history textbooks for future generations to learn about, that is the ultimate middle finger that you can give someone. Crimson One's past is never explained, but perhaps he grew up in that kind of hostile environment. Maybe he grew up being told that he wouldn't be anyone special, and that when he died, he would just be another unrecognizable name etched into a tombstone. That determination to prove those people wrong, plus an unwavering loyalty to the Federation, resulted in him joining the Air Force as one of the best pilots ever to take to the skies. Joining the military as a fighter pilot is a pretty good way to leave your mark on the world. Not everyone is willing to join the military, especially for the job of strapping yourself into a multi-million-dollar aviation war machine. Like Bookie said in Bottom of the Barrel, the first mission of the Frontline 59 DLC, you gotta be just a tad bit crazy to become a fighter pilot. Crimson One took it a step further, becoming one of the Federation's best pilots by joining the Peacekeepers. That elite status would ensure his name would remain in people's minds for years to come. Whenever he would sortie, Crimson One's combat record would show that he had more than earned his place as a peacekeeper. And just like that, Crimson One had done it. He had secured his place in the world as the best pilot ever to take to the skies. That is, until Monarch showed up. Monarch destroyed Crimson One's world as he knew it. All of a sudden, it seemed like Monarch would be getting all of the attention. And with every defeat that Crimson One suffered, his status of being remembered and looked up to kept on slipping out of his hands. Eventually, it got to a point where the only way his reputation could be salvaged was through extreme desperate measures. With his final breath, Crimson One begged Monarch to remember him, to keep the memory of him alive for as long as possible. What makes this all even worse is that Monarch didn't have any personal beef with Crimson One. The mercenary was literally just doing his job. To Monarch, Crimson One was just another pilot to shoot down, another couple hundred, or perhaps a couple thousand given this was a peacekeeper, dollars to add to his bank account since Sicario pilots are paid by the target. However much money Crimson One was worth to Monarch, it probably didn't mean a whole lot to him by the end of the war. Monarch probably even felt a lot of pity towards Crimson One when he finally shot him down for good. Will Monarch respect the wishes of his rival and keep him and his story alive for years to come? Only time will tell.